Hey guys, welcome back to Milk and Cookies Total War. I'm your host, Indie Pride, and Vermintide 2 is on the way. We don't have an official release date just yet, but it's currently scheduled to be dropping in Q1 of 2018 for PC, Xbox One, and PS4, although realistically, the console release date will likely be at least a few months behind. Without question, one of my most anticipated games this year, and as soon as I get my hands on the beta, I'll be diving right into it and dropping as much content for the full game as I can. There's been a veritable avalanche of information over the last month regarding enemies, regarding gameplay elements, changes from Vermintide 1, and the feature set this game will have, including mod support. So I wanted to start a new series of videos that will get everyone up to speed with what's going on for Vermintide 2, both from a gameplay perspective and a lore perspective. And with that in mind, this video will focus on the main characters and classes available to each, and how these will alter gameplay when compared to the first game. So for those who don't know, there were 5 playable characters in the first game. Sienna Foiganasis the Bright Wizard, Barden Gorixon the Dwarf Ranger, Victor Saltzpyre the Witch Hunter, Karelian the Wood Elf Waywatcher, and Marcus Kruber the Empire Soldier. Every single one of them will be returning for Vermintide 2. But one of the most interesting things about the first game was that it doesn't tell a story through traditional narrative elements like cutscenes. Instead, you piece together the narrative purely through traversing each mission, taking in the sights and sounds yourself, and perhaps more importantly, through dialogue between the unlikely companions. We don't really get the full backstory of any character, so going into Vermintide 2, there's still some pretty big mysteries regarding their past, but the dialogue and writing were fantastic, and although the narrative itself isn't anywhere near as important as eviscerating ratmen, it still gave us some really good insight on what's driving each character. For example, Barden the Dwarf Ranger is seeking the long-lost hold of Karak Zorn, a famous dwarf settlement in the Southlands long ago cut off from the rest of the Dwarf Empire. Sienna the Bright Wizard is a literal flame-casting junkie, addicted to creating fireballs and the rush of energy in the same way a heroin user is addicted to shooting opiates into their bloodstream. Kruber's entire regiment, the men under his charge on the field of battle, were sucked into a purple sun Azarius by an evil necromancer, and the only thing that saved him was the heroic act of one of his soldiers in pushing him out of the way. And these storylines will be carrying over to Vermintide 2 in some pretty interesting ways as well. I am of course talking about the new career system. So essentially, there are 3 different archetypes or classes for each character, each with their own weapon sets, skill trees, and abilities, and each representing a path that character could have taken in life during the ending of the world. An Ascended archetype that represents a jump to the next echelon of Warhammer society, a Dishonored archetype where each character eschews the traditions and stability of what they were before by taking the Slayer Oath, giving into their addictions to magic, or letting Cain's bloodlust enter their heart, and the third archetype is basically a continuation of the career path they followed in Vermintide 1. So let's go over those now, and talk about some of the lore and playstyles that each will provide. For Barden the Dwarf, he can either continue his Game 1 career as a veteran ranger, he can become an Ironbreaker, or he can take the Slayer Oath. The Ranger Veteran is essentially his balance class, with a multitude of ranged weapons and the ability to get in close while retaining your mobility, bashing in Skaven and Chaos warrior skulls up close in melee. His Ironbreaker class is exactly what you would expect, an elite, heavily armored tank designed to hold a choke point in the dark recesses of the world, armed and armored for the never-ending contest against Skaven and the other monsters of the depths. As an Ironbreaker, Barden has a taunting shield wall ability that forces enemies to attack him and temporarily gives him immunity to incoming damage, and we can expect some very high stamina on the weapons from this class, so he'll be able to absorb a lot of attacks before having his block broken, and a lot of crowd control with shield bashes and hammer strikes. And finally, Slayer Barden is his Dishonored archetype. Angered by his inability to continue his search for Karak Zorn and fulfill his oaths, he takes the Slayer Oath and becomes a true specialist in close quarter slaughter, a pure DPS character with a Gromroll Great Axe or dual axes. We assume there are more weapons than that for each class, but that's what's been given or confirmed so far. Now, the Slayer Oath prohibits Barden from using any ranged weaponry, but the entire point of a Slayer is that they willingly seek death to atone for their failed oaths, and the best way to do that is to get up close and personal with something like a Storm Fiend, or a Chaos Spawn, or a Bile Troll, and you can't really do that if you're sitting really far back trying to snipe things from long range. For Sienna the Bright Wizard, Pyromancer, Battle Wizard, and Unchained are her 3 careers. As we've already alluded to, she is an addict, forever torn between her will to control the destructive magics of Akshi, the Wind of Fire, and a burgeoning desire to set the world alight for no other reason than the rush of magic in her bones. Another being might have already succumbed, and indeed many have, as the temptations of chaos are often way too much to resist, but Sienna's compassion and wry sense of humor kept her grounded during the initial stages of Uberstrike and the months afterwards. And if we're being honest, she and Barden are pretty clearly the most likable characters and the most relatable, and you can definitely see the charisma and the compassion that kind of exemplifies her character throughout her quotes. Yeah, she wants to burn Skaven down, but she's actually like a decent person, which is not necessarily so true for some of the other characters in the game. As a battle wizard, she unleashes powerful area of effect spells, immolating large numbers of enemies, turning onrushing hordes into smoldering piles of ash, and in order to find peace, Sienna had to kind of dial it back and temper her addiction. Her flame lust will always be there, of course, but she now dims it a bit through more structured and organized means. And in this class, she chose a touch of military discipline and a bit of meditation to deal with the addiction that threatens to consume her. The Pyromancer career turned Sienna into an efficient single-target annihilator, specializing in incinerating high-value targets at a brisk pace, one at a time. So this is her special killer class, and it's likely the beam staff will be in her arsenal here, the type to snipe down and control gutter runners before they can pounce, and do constant headshot damage to boss types as she lays down a constant stream of accurate flame. But Unchained is what I'm most excited about, as this class represents her descent towards chaos, her addiction fully realized now and completely taking over her life. Her focus in Unchained is in magically enhanced melee combat. She can provide both an armor of flame that protects her and a mighty spell of fiery destruction that detonates around herself and protects allies. As she lives from one dizzying magical high to the next, getting as close to the foe as she can, the better to witness that sublime moment when flesh and bone succumb to the glorious flame that she now serves. This will be the biggest departure for Sienna in the series, one that looks like it won't even have staffs associated with it at all, just pure, raw, elemental casting and CQC, which could be a ton of fun for the Bright Wizard. Now, Victor Saltzpyre, may Holy Sigmar bless that ravaged body, can become a bounty hunter, a witch hunter captain, or a zealot. Bounty hunter is, funnily enough, his career continuation in a way from Vermintide 1, as the first game set him up as a hardline Puritan in the beginnings of a shift towards a more radical ideology, and rightly so. I mean, the guy had his eye stabbed out hunting both Skaven and vampires in an underground lair, and started learning a lot about the Under Empire. So when his superiors were still trying to maintain that conspiracy of silence, despite all of Reichland literally burning under a Skaven assault, that kind of pissed him off, and he went rogue. Or mentally, at least. He's still a fully sanctioned witch hunter, but feels betrayed, and rightly so, by the Order, because they threatened him with charges of heresy for simply just speaking his mind after literally killing thousands of ratmen single-handedly. Like, he saw them firsthand, he knows they're real. The fact that they're still trying to maintain that during the end times is a little bit ridiculous, because people are either dead or they're panicking like crazy. So this class is more bruising, but still maintains some balance with good range and melee capabilities both, but it has less finesse, more armor, more damage, and it's a little bit slower and less mobile than the Witch Hunter class from Game 1, and it has the falchion and repeater pistol. Both are confirmed for the Bounty Hunter class. Now, the Witch Hunter captain is focused on finesse and speed, with his widest variety of weaponry, and certainly with access to his famous rapier and pistol combo, and that's basically him getting promoted to the next echelon of Witch Hunter territory. But, and you might be beginning to notice a theme here, the Dishonored archetype will be the most significant departure for the character. Where in another life, a wary Victor Saltzpyre stared into the flames of Uberstrike and found the courage to confront his superiors, in his life as a zealot, he found only the solace of the furnace, of a world fit only to be cleansed in righteous fire. Victor no longer places his trust in the organizations and structures of the Empire, but in Sigmar alone, basically becoming a flagellant melee fighter, favoring heavy flails and holy rage as expressions of worship and tools of battle. Faith can carry a body through the most horrendous of wounds, and the zealot has dark-eyed faith to spare. So this class might get access to some kind of battle prayer for Sigmar, definitely the kind of character that could get a rage meter that temporarily increases damage and attack speed, but makes you lose stamina when you come out of the effect, but we don't have all the info there is on that front quite yet. Now for Karelian the Elf and Kruber the Soldier, Fatshark have only unveiled one class for each, but we actually know 2 of the 3 for both characters, and we can make some reasonable guesses on the final 2 we don't know. So that means at this point, there are only 2 classes in the game that we're not 100% sure about. Kruber can become a mercenary or a knight, and Karelian can be a shade or a waywatcher. The knight is Kruber's reluctant climb up the social ladder. As is logical, after almost single-handedly stopping a Skaven invasion, he was knighted for his heroic contribution in the defense of Uberstrike, and gets the Sigmar's Blessing passive, temporarily converting fatal damage into a bit of health, and his active ability is called Valiant Charge, which lets him bowl through enemies at a high speed. I'm not actually currently a fan of the implementation at all as it stands at the moment, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, I actually don't think that this is his Ascended archetype. I think it's going to be his continuation from the main storyline from Game 1, so I think Mercenary might be his Dishonored class, and a Warrior Priest or something similar might be his Ascended, but honestly, it's really hard to know. We know with the Knight, he keeps his two-handed hammer and a repeater handgun from Vermintide 1, but besides that, it's entirely possible Knight is Ascended and Soldier is a third, representing a continuation of his normal story arc. We'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. This game is, again, launching in Q1 of 2018, so we're going to get our hands on it very soon. And we've saved the best for last. My caustic waifu Karelian, love her or hate her, she's got a fantastic voice actress in Alex Wilton Regan, and a really good mix of otherworldly and perhaps unwarranted superiority, and caustic, biting wit to top it all off, and that's why I love her. Her careers are Shade, Waywatcher, and an unknown third. Now, the Shade career isn't her literally becoming a Dark Elf, but she certainly adopts their bloodthirstiness, something that has been hinted at to be lurking within her multiple times throughout the DLC maps. In the Castle Drakenfell's Hall of Blood, for example, she makes it very clear that many Wood Elves feel the call of Cain and are comforted by the god of murder. As the pain of her exile from Athelloren continued to fester within her, a new voice introduced itself in hushed tones within her mind and in her dreams. The whispers promised guidance and purpose, and Karelian, sick to death of the world of men, paid attention. It was the voice of Cain, one she readily accepted as she embarked on a sinister journey to find her true self. So Shade will clearly be her Dishonored version. It has a long spear, a repeater Dark Elf crossbow, and 2 confirmed abilities. A passive, naturally called Murderous Prowess, that automatically gives her backstab damage on all her weapons, and an active ability called Infiltrate, where she can blend into the environment and phase through enemies, becoming undetectable and losing all aggro for a few seconds. And those obviously synergize very nicely. You pop out of invis and deal additional damage with your first attack from behind, and of course, the ability to phase through enemies when stuck in a corner is pretty strong as well. The Waywatcher is her second career, a continuation of her traditional story arc, and for her third, we don't know what it's going to be yet, but I'll be honest, I would kind of love it for it to be something goofy like a High Elf Swordmaster or something. Because again, these careers are what-if scenarios. What if they were born in a different time or had something happen that changed their entire life goal and outlook on things? Not literally who the characters are. So while it would definitely be a stretch, for the sake of gameplay variety, something High Elf would be really cool, but a Waystalker or a Glade Lord is probably more likely as her Ascended archetype. We don't know what it's going to be quite yet, though. I think her Shade career will be the most melee-focused one, hopefully with some really cool Dark Elf weapons like the Drakes carried by the Hargoneth Executioners, or the Halberds carried by the Black Guard of Nagorond, but we shall see. So those are the careers and abilities that we currently know about. Obviously, lots to be unveiled in terms of gameplay and mechanics, but I think that gives us a pretty good baseline of what to expect going forward. Now, one of the things that characterized Vermintide 1 was that weapons, not the characters themselves, were what really differentiated playstyles. Only the Bright Wizard truly had unique mechanics with her overcharge meter and heating and venting. This looks to be changing in Vermintide 2, and it could be a good or bad thing for the game. The cool thing about the weapon system in Vermintide 1 was that by playing Dwarf, you weren't locked into playing a certain role. You could certainly go for a tank-themed build if you wanted to, but your weapon choices were what ultimately gave you the flexibility and the variation to play how you wanted. So you weren't forced into playing a shield bash tank if you didn't want. You could get a one-handed weapon and be mobile just like any other character. And that meant that skill and positioning and timing were the most important factors of combat, and these were things that you were encouraged to learn about and get better with. On the one hand, these new abilities, like the Shades being able to actually fade into the shadows and phase through enemies to get out of a sticky situation, are kind of cool. They offer a new dynamic and new gameplay elements, and that can benefit replayability in the long run. On the other hand, I'm a little bit nervous about their actual implementation. So, I want them to remain grounded, basically, and realistic in regards to the Warhammer universe in general, both visually and from a gameplay perspective. Yes, a Wood Elf Waywatcher is inhumanly fast and accurate, and I want that to be represented, but I don't want a longbow that can fire 4 arrows at once. That isn't realistic, that isn't a thing that happens in the lore. It would kind of ruin my immersion. And that's not a straw man, because we've already seen an ability from Marcus Kruber that does just that. His Knight class has that charge ability in the alpha. It looks like something straight out of Dragon Ball Z. Basically, this like 500 mile per hour Kaioken bum rush that covers 30 feet at least instantly, and when you hit a wall, you just kind of slide across it. And there's no sense of weight or momentum behind it at all, really, and it doesn't make any sense for the character or setting whatsoever. I want these abilities to stay grounded and be roughly within the capacity of what the characters could actually accomplish. Giving Kruber a charge is completely fine, but make it slow and bruising and powerful, meaty and impactful, like what would actually happen if a 300-pound knight slammed into you. Obviously, it's just alpha gameplay, and there's plenty of time to change it, but in alpha and beta stage right now is exactly when we need to be giving feedback for what we see, so Fat Shark has time to make changes. Currently, the charge takes what would be a cool idea, but ends up looking pretty janky visually and super out of character for an Empire soldier or an Empire knight. Someone who for sure is a lord of combat by this point, but he's not a superhero either. There's nothing supernatural about him. He's a 6'4", thick bloke who really knows how to kill things with a hammer, and I want that to stay true to what his character actually is. So when he turns into a Dragon Ball Z character and goes "Nani" and like screams like 30 feet across the screen like in the flash of an eye, like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work with his character. So while I most certainly want these new passives and active abilities to be noticeable and impactful, they need to be tailored to fit the logic and fluff of each of those characters, and I think Fat Shark could get too carried away if they're not careful. My other fear, besides making just super over-the-top and out-of-place abilities for everybody, is that Fat Shark might just split the already existing weapons from Game 1 up across the different classes and just call it a day. Because Vermintide 1 already has weapon implementation that alters your playstyle. If you pick a beam staff that burns through single targets with headshots, that's a very different game than using the conflagration staff that burns through hordes of Skaven and clan rats and is more known for its crowd control than its single target DPS. There will be skill trees for each character, but the question is, how much will it actually allow a player to tailor their play to a specific class? I want meaningful options that truly change the gameplay depending on what you pick in their skill tree, and obviously want the skill tree for each career to be unique and logical within that career. And if you're gonna bother adding one, I don't want to see like plus 5% fire damage, minus 5% speed or something like that. That's boring. I want impactful, noticeable changes to gameplay. For example, stuff like an upgraded shove for Karelian that incorporates a powerful kick that does damage rather than a simple push with the hand that doesn't really create much space, or one of the war dances of Loic, a spinning attack that could clear enemies all around you. Something that fits with the character, but would give you an actual additional gameplay element that you can incorporate into your game. Or stuff like a fast throwing axe, or a throwing knife animation for Barden, or for Karelian, kind of like Salt Spire secondary pistol with the rapier in Game 1, that gives you a very quick one-hit kill weapon that you can weave into combat and combo with your normal attack chain. So if you're in the middle of your attack chain and you see a Skaven coming up from your side, you can quickly turn and do that quick animation to throw a throwing axe and get that one-hit kill. Or the ability to alter our attack chains with a weapon, tailoring it for our own playstyle. So if we want single target DPS as the first attack in our chain, we could customize it a bit for each weapon and kind of change how the weapon actually handles. So a deep set of meaningful choices and customization will go a long way in adding that replayability that people have been clamoring for. So I'm curious how Fat Shark decides to handle it all. It sounds like they're definitely moving in the right direction, but I don't want ultimately it all to completely overshadow what I find is the really awesome thing about Vermintide, the core gameplay. Because at the end of the day, it's the gritty, meaty, hand-to-hand combat, some of the best I've ever seen in an FPS game ever, that has kept me coming back for a year and a half. And that's what Fat Shark really needs to nail, the core combat mechanics, the Warhammer atmosphere, and please give me Jesper Kyd again. His work on Assassin's Creed and Vermintide 1 and some of his other OSTs have been amazing. His music really helps set the tone and set the spirit of the Warhammer world, and I would love to see him return as a composer. And I think it's clear from the concept art, from the gameplay, and the screenshots we've seen so far, Fat Shark is nailing the Warhammer atmosphere yet again. So I think this game is in good hands, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. So if you enjoyed that look at Vermintide 2, join me next time where we will discuss the massive amount of enemies that have been confirmed and hinted at for Vermintide 2, how they will function, and how they can be defeated. Thank you for watching. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.